My name is Yousef Khalilollahi. I'm the Vice President of Core Vertical Markets at Xilinx. I am based in San Jose, California, but very happy and glad to be here in today's events. For those of you who may not be familiar with Xilinx, we are a semiconductor company, #1 player in the programmable devices. And we have a very large development footprint here in Hyderabad, over 800 people, and I'll talk about that a little bit later on. So to give you the agenda of what I'm going to talk about is that I'll start by talking about the global defense market and the market conditions in the global defense market. In my role, I oversee the worldwide aerospace and defense market for Xilinx. So I'll try to give you my perspective on the dynamics of this market, what we're seeing as the key trends in this market. Then switch to a little bit of a industry trends in the semiconductors. I've been in the semiconductor industry for over 27 years, and there has been a multitude of dynamics over the last few years that affects the defense industry as well as other industries. Maybe talk a little bit about the application trends and where Xilinx focused on. That would be the conclusion of the presentation. To first start by the global defense budget. When we want to assess the global defense market dynamics, the first place to start is the global defense budgets. This chart shows you the defense spending in billions of dollars by the countries involved. Of course, as most of you probably guessed, US dominates the defense spending in the world, over $611 billion of defense spending. But what's interesting is that, of course, US represents over 36% of defense spending, and although NATO countries are required to spend 2% of their GDPs on defense, the country that has actually have been climbing the charts over the last few years, the fastest has been India. A few years ago, India was toward the bottom of this chart as I keep tracking this over the last few years. And India has now come to the number 5, only behind China, Russia, Saudi Arabia. So definitely the global defense market, and specifically in India, has been very positive. Now moving toward the general Asia and Oceania, which includes the countries and the regions that you see here, the trend from last year to this year, so from 2015 to 2016, has been 4.6% uptick in defense spending in the region. And that adds up to $450 billion in total defense spending in this region. So, and oh, by the way, if you track that to the past 10 years, the defense spending has increased by 64% over the past 10 years in this region. Now, more specifically in India, over the last 9 years, the defense spending has risen by 55%. So to the point that if you took a look at it about 9 years ago, it was around $36 billion range, and now it's more in the $56 billion range. Let me now switch to semiconductor trends, and this is an important factor in the dynamics of the defense industry as well as other industries. This chart shows you the cost of bringing out the first chip for a semiconductor company over the last few generations. On the y-axis, you see the amount of dollars that's spent in millions of dollars to bring out the first device, the first chip out. And on the bottom, you see the different process technologies, starting from 65 nanometer all the way to 16 nanometer, the different process technologies. Now, what's interesting is that if you were a semiconductor company and you wanted to bring out the first device out back in the 65 nanometer process technology, it costed you $30 to $40 million. that cost has risen in 16 nanometer to over $300 million to bring out that first device. So this economic reality is a very important factor in the next couple of charts that I'm going to show you. Now, keep in mind, this is an industry report, an average. For different semiconductor companies, this numbers actually could be wildly different. In fact, for Xilinx, at 16 nanometer, the cost of bringing out that first device is twice of that $350 million number that you see here. So this is just in general for the semiconductor industry. Now, this cost is dictated by the rising cost of mask sets, verification, IP, software, validation, and a whole host of other factors. Now, that cost plays in the ROI, or return on investment analysis, for any semiconductor company. For those of you who have worked for startups and have gone to venture capitalists and try to raise money, you'll notice that venture capitals, when they invest $1, typically they want $5 to $10 back, 5 to 10x back. I know I've done it. I've worked for a startup, and that was the VC request to get 5 to 10x back. Well, semiconductor companies are very similar in the sense that they need to invest and then have a return of somewhere around 5 to 10x return. Well, it was okay back in the 65 nanometer process technology because, remember, it costed somewhere between $30 to $50 million to bring out that first device out. So the return of $300 to $500 million was a reasonable return that you could expect for many applications. But the issue here is that as you're going down the process geometry, for example, to 16 nanometer and 14 nanometer, the return has to now be over $3 billion for the semiconductor companies to invest the amount that's required to bring out these devices out. Now, that becomes a bit more prohibitive because not too many applications and not too many companies can command the type of return that's required to justify that investment. And this economic reality that I just talked about has translated into this picture of the semiconductor industry that you see over the last 10 years. In 2005, the list of semiconductor companies on the left were numerous. Consolidation, mergers, acquisitions have resulted in the picture that you see on the 2016 block here. Many acquisitions and many consolidations has happened over the last 10 years. And these are the result of the economic realities that I just talked about over this. Now, in fact, this chart changes so fast that it's hard for me to keep up this chart because since we make this chart, there's still new changes have happened. So that has been the dynamics of the industry that has resulted in consolidation. So now the question is, well, what about Xilinx? Why is Xilinx necessarily not subject to that? And our strategy has been always to have a multiple markets strategy. When we bring out that first semiconductor device out, we serve multiple markets with those same devices, and that gives us the ability to get the returns that would justify the investment of aggressively going down the process geometry and be able to bring out latest and greatest products out to the market. And one of those markets that's very important to us is the aerospace and defense market. It's extremely important because it represents a very significant portion of our revenue. So what are some of the aerospace and trends that we are seeing from our perspective worldwide? More and more emphasis on innovation and maintaining technology supremacy over adversaries. We're seeing that more and more governments of the world wanting to do that. Fewer combat soldiers and more of advanced electronics, equipment, such as radar, vision system, unmanned vehicles. So more and more of the spending is being actually done on the defense electronics rather than soldiers and some of the other expenses. Probably the hottest area that I see more and more is the electronic warfare. The electronic warfare over the last 2 years has been the key area of activities and will continue to be over the next few years, is electronic warfare. We're seeing more and more satellite launches in communication satellites, navigation satellites, imaging, and the satellite payload contents is having more and more complexity. Again, needing more defense aerospace electronics. There's heightened attention on cybersecurity, and that translates into, again, the dynamics of needing more defense electronics. And commercial avionics is experiencing, and it's in the midst of a very good, healthy backlog. If you take a look at Boeing and Airbus backlog, they are at all-time highs, and they have many years of backlog already in place. And some of the other trends is around the aerospace and defense companies wanting to have shortened design cycles, get to market quicker and faster, and have more emphasis on life cycle management and updating existing electronics quicker. So these are some of the trends that we see in the market. So what are some of the challenges? So what are some of the challenges that the aerospace and defense companies have? Well, aerospace and defense applications operate in very stringent conditions. Temperature, high temperature, cold temperature, moisture, radiation. Have IP protection is important. If the equipment is actually launched in an enemy territory, you don't want the intellectual property to be reverse engineered. It's rigorous qualification and reliability requirements, as well as long product life cycles. 15 years, 20 years, 25 years. These stringent requirements really demand the semiconductor companies to have the fortitude to be able to address these requirements. And not every semiconductor company really has the will and the fortitude to address all of these challenges. And for Xilinx, because it's such an important part of our business, we make special products and special consideration for the aerospace and defense market. We bring out not only commercial products, but a whole host of defense-grade and space-grade products that goes beyond the commercial offerings to address the needs and the requirements of the aerospace and defense market. Some of the defense-grade features, such as high temperature and low temperature offerings, ruggedized packaging, leaded content or unleaded content. In a world that is going away from lead, some of the aerospace and defense applications require lead, so we offer that. We offer very long product life cycles for aerospace and defense world, 15 years, 20 years, and beyond. So these are some of the special things we do for the aerospace and defense market. What are some of the applications that we're focused on? The applications are very much reflective of what I see in my discussions with the customers here in India. Space applications, again, these would be commercial and military satellites. Military and commercial avionics, we're by far the #1 programmable player in the military avionics, and we're growing our footprint in the commercial avionics by offering special packages like the DO-254 and DO-178 packages. Missiles and munitions is a key target focus area for us, but the hottest area, as I mentioned, is EW and ISR, intelligence, surveillance, reconnaissance, radar, and electronic warfare. That's the hottest area, and that's where we actually are bringing out newer products, which I'll talk about in just a second, to address that. Military communication, handheld radios, man-pack, vehicular, airborne radios, as well as high-performance compute applications for the government, for cybersecurity and others. So in order to address these applications, we vectored beyond our traditional offering. We were founded in 1984, and up until 2010-ish or so, we were bringing out faster and cheaper and more integrated devices out to the market. But what we did over the last few years is to integrate processors and other capabilities into our devices So we vectored into an SoC path that's continuing into our next generations, as well as innovating in a 3D IC stacked silicon interconnect technology that allows us to bring more complex devices and state-of-the-art devices in a very economic manner. So these are the three vectors that we'll continue to invest in the future. One of the key aspects, and I'm not going to talk about our products too much, but I did want to bring out one product that will be announced in the next, more details about it will be announced in the next few months or so, and is this 16-nanometer SoC product with integrated ADC DACs. It's extremely attractive for the EW-ISR applications. You have the same device that not only has programmability through programmable logic, but has a whole host of processing capabilities in quad A53 embedded in the device, as well as real-time processors, R5s. Now add to that integrating ADC DACs. These are high-speed A2Ds and DACs, 4 to 6 gigasample per second ranges that are integrated in devices. And these devices will be available in the next few months and in 2018 for customers to use. And this will be used heavily in EW and ISR applications across the world. What are some of the challenges we see in the EW ISR applications? Well, the challenges I mentioned, it's very hot because one of the key specific areas of challenge is that the enemy continues to develop newer algorithms of electronic warfare, and reprogrammability and being able to adjust your algorithms to respond to the enemy developments is very important. That's why reprogrammability of the semiconductor device is extremely important. Performance is very important, as defined by range, resolution, sensitivity. Anti-jamming, getting into in almost all devices, and scalability to be able to have the same platform go across multiple missions. And of course, cost and schedule. And that's becoming more and more important because you have to respond quickly and you have to do it in an economic manner. And on top of it, it has to be reliable. So this RFSoC device that I just talked to you about, by integrating the ADC DACs, it allows you to really address the swap analysis, the swap issues that are faced by the designers of the devices. And basically what it does is that it integrates the ADC, external ADC DACs into one device, a programmable device, and not only solves the swap issues, but also has extremely low latency and lower power consumption. Because by integrating these devices, you no longer have to go off-chip, and hence saving power as well. This gives you a little bit of an overview of the power savings by integrating the ADC DACs into the device. And not only the integration cost saves you power, but also in the design cycle. And many of our customers are interested in this because of the swap and the power, but also the design cycle being shortened because you no longer have to do the embedded design and the digital design and analog interface all different separately. By integrating them together, this completely simplifies the whole design process and shortens the design cycle, the form factor, and lowers the power consumption. In my interactions with aerospace and defense customers over the last year when we were planning this product, I've gotten the most positive reaction of any other product that we've had to this. As I mentioned, this will be available in 2018 for sampling. Let me switch a little bit to space. I mentioned earlier that we see trends in more complexity in satellite communication and satellite imaging and other applications in space. It used to be a few years ago that the satellites acted as a kind of a relay, a bent pipe to send data back to the ground, and the processing used to be done on the ground. Well, that has kind of changed. More and more of the processing is being done on the satellite, and hence more complexity is required on the satellite. So what we do is to bring out products, space-grade devices that address these challenges and allows the satellites to do more processing in space and not necessarily have to relay back to the ground. One more innovation that we've done over the, again, this last few months we've made some announcements, and this also will be available in 2018, is the integrating high bandwidth memory into our devices. And this is also very attractive to aerospace and defense customers because it solves the memory bandwidth issue by completely bringing in the large amounts of memory inside the device. I'm talking up to 64 gigabits of DRAM being integrated inside the device. And not only having the stacks of memory inside the chip, and by the way, the technology we use to do this is our patented SSIT technology that I talked about a little bit earlier. But we also have the controllers, the axis switch, and all of the hooks that's required to be able to have a very high bandwidth memory interface with the programmable logic inside the device. So this solves a lot of issues in regards to the memory interface outside the chip and power consumption savings. And my colleague tomorrow will actually talk more about this and the more details around this device as we talk about the products. Now, it's important to have good semiconductor and silicon devices to be able to design state-of-the-art defense electronics. But silicon is not all. It's very important to have the proper design methodology. It's very important that the tools and the libraries and the software that we give you allows you to take advantage of those in a timely fashion. We're seeing more and more aerospace and defense customers moving away from lower level design methodologies to higher level, C-level and level type of a design methodology, and not wanting to have RTL coding. And this shortens the design cycle, and we have introduced over the last 4 or 5 years a number of software-defined platforms to allow customers to define their design at a higher level of abstraction and be able to take advantage of the silicon features in a timely fashion and shortening of that design cycle. I will end here by talking about what I mentioned earlier, which is Xilinx has a very strong development presence here in Hyderabad. We have R&D operations here in Hyderabad, over 800 people in our offices here. We do end-to-end product developments as it relates to software, silicon, and system design tools applications. We have a very active university reach programs that allows us to interact with the local universities in a number of different programs. And we are the #1 supplier to the A&D market here in terms of programmable devices. And these applications mirror the applications that I talked to you about earlier in regards to Xilinx's focus. It's basically the same applications. So with that, I will end, and I thank you for your attention, and hopefully we'll see you again soon here in Hyderabad again next year. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Yousef, and thank you very much for sponsoring Devtronics. Thank you so much. So request, what? QA? Okay, we have time for QA.
Okay, excellent.
All right, so a couple of minutes for question and answers. Any questions for Yousef? Yeah.
Do you have any support program for startups from Xilinx?
Yeah, we contribute to various organizations locally that support startups, and we also have, as I mentioned, university programs. But however, locally, I'm not aware of a direct startup program that we have, but we do that through other local governments and local organizations.
Any other questions? Yeah, there's one there.
Good morning, Yousef. This is Meher from Techolution. So I've seen a couple of lines of yours around IoT and machine learning, but given the very nature of the complexity of IoT and taking into the machine learning, right? And the complexities around the securities in the IoTs and all. Especially, what is your take on bringing that adoption of IoT and this machine learning into especially the aerospace and defense programs? Have you seen?
Could you repeat the question? The question part.
See, by nature, IoT is very complex,
Yes.
and the current state of the standards around the security is, not yet defined. It is loosely coupled. Only a couple of regulations or some set of frameworks set up by the New York, IoT rules, right? And especially coming to the aerospace and defense, which is very sensitive and internal security, right? So, what is your take on, or what is the Xilinx plan for bringing in that concept, and where do you see the market going in that space?
Sure, thank you. Yeah, so first of all, because aerospace and defense has been an important market for a long time, we have been very active in bringing out component-level security features into our devices for many years. So long before industrial IoT was or Internet of Things was a very hot thing, we were in the security aspects of business because of the aerospace and defense heritage that we have. So we have 3, 4, 5 generations of security features in our components to account for some of the security requirements. So for example, the SoCs that I showed you earlier have a number of security features at the component level that are state-of-the-art. So if we get a chance to walk you through that, you'll see that it's something that we actually design into the products for aerospace and defense, and now for Internet of Things, automotive requires security, industrial, a lot of different applications require security. But because of that heritage we've had, we've always known that security is going to become more and more important, and we've invested in it for many generations already.
Okay, there's one more question there.
For a long time, you have been talking about Xilinx and space. And Vertex 5, last 3 years we have been listening, and today it is, I'm happy that you are talking about SoC also. My specific question is that why not Xilinx Vertex 6 or 7 for space applications? Do you have any such plans in near future? And if not so, why that is not being addressed?
Sure. So to answer your question, yes, we do have plans in the future. But for space-grade devices, for us, it doesn't make sense to do that on every node, every process node. The realities, the economic realities, basically forces us to bring out space-grade devices every 2, 3, 4 node or so. And yes, we are in the process of actually defining and bringing out and announcing the next generation of space-grade devices over the next few months, in fact. And so stay tuned for that. That's all I say. I probably can't share the actual specifics of it yet for you. But it's an important market that we do address, and we are planning to address with the next generation of space-level, space-grade devices. So it's something that we do plan to bring out. Okay.
Any more? Yeah, one from Krishna.
I'm Krishna from Rambus. You showed the integrated ADC and DAC product, which is getting available for samples in 2018. And in the block diagram, you had something like 2 ADCs and 2 DACs outside, burning up to about 10 watts of power. And then you are integrating that inside, and that's in a 16 nanometer FinFET product. What kind of power numbers are you able to achieve inside when you integrate at those speeds? If you can share that.
Yeah, so the example that I showed you was an example of a 2x2 set. It's like, but remember, in programmable devices, we have anywhere from 4x4, 8x8, 16x16. So the power number savings depends on how many channels of ADC DAC are being translated. So it's a wide range. But that example gives you a perspective on for this particular example, how much saving we saw in terms of the power consumption. But we have in this family up to 16 by 16 ADC DACs. As you see, there are different members of the family. So we have the largest one, 16 by 16, and in that device, when you integrate all of that inside the device, you'll see a more substantial power savings.
Okay, one more there. It's a lot of questions for you, Yousef.
Good.
I am from Githam University, sir. So as part of University Connect, how can you help the university students? University Connect you have mentioned as part of University Connect, lab setup and other things you have mentioned.
Sorry,
I think can you repeat that question, please? What's the question?
How can you help for the university regarding the laboratory setups and workshops?
What kind of university programs we have?
Yeah, industry programs.
Okay, so we have a University Reach program, and to be honest with you, I'm not the expert on our University Reach programs, but we have a worldwide University Reach program that basically we donate and we work with them on a number of different areas in reference designs, platforms, tools, and such. So if you want to get more information, our local folks here can give you a lot more information about specifically what we do here in India. I'm not an expert on that, to be honest.
Okay. Any more questions? Okay, there you go.
You mentioned electronic warfare and other applications in A&D, which you are seeing a lot of traction in. With regards specifically to India, are those same applications seeing traction here? Are you seeing something specific in India that you focused on?
No, in fact, we see the same thing. I was here for the last 2 days visiting customers, and we see the exact same level of enthusiasm and excitement over EW, ISR applications that we see here in the rest of the world as well. So I think it's a worldwide trend, and it's reflective of what we see in exactly other places as well. It's very similar.
Okay, thank you so much. So at this time, request past Chairman Krishnamurthy, a corporate VP and MD of Rambus, to come and felicitate and Yousef. Thanks a lot.